A chance encounter in the repair bay. The orbital station Nexus 7 hung in space like a steel flower, its petals reaching toward the stars. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds passed through its corridors every day. Merchants, diplomats, warriors, and wanderers all crossed paths in this neutral territory where the great powers of the galaxy maintained an uneasy peace. In the lower repair bays, where the air smelled of coolant and ozone, Marcus Chan worked alone. His human hands moved with practiced ease across the engine panel of a Valtorian scout ship, rewiring circuits that the station's automated systems had declared beyond repair. He hummed an old Earth song as he worked, something his grandfather had taught him during long nights in their garage back on Mars. "Excuse me, please." The voice was small and uncertain, speaking in heavily accented Galactic Common. Marcus looked up from his work to see a young Drakari girl standing at the entrance to his bay. She couldn't have been more than 12 cycles old by human standards, her crimson scales dulled by dust, and her wings, those magnificent wings that should have gleamed like rubies, hung limp and damaged at her sides. "Hey there," Marcus said gently, setting down his plasma torch. "You lost?" The girl shook her head, and Marcus noticed the tears forming in her golden eyes. "My wing. It's broken. The medical bay said they cannot help without my mother's authorization code, but she is away on diplomatic mission. They said to find a mechanic instead, because Drakari wings are considered mechanical augmentation by station protocols." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The bureaucratic nonsense of the Galactic Federation never ceased to amaze him. To classify living wings as mechanical just because Drakari biology incorporated crystalline structures was absurd. "Come here, kid," he said, grabbing a clean work stool. "Let me take a look." Understanding through compassion. The girl approached hesitantly, her clawed feet clicking on the metal deck. Up close, Marcus could see the extent of the damage. One wing had been crushed, the delicate crystalline lattice that gave Drakari their legendary flight capabilities was shattered in 3 places. It must have been incredibly painful. "What's your name?" Marcus asked as he examined the wing, his touch as gentle as if he were handling the most delicate earth butterfly. "Lysara," she whispered. "Daughter of Ambassador Cathras." "Well, Lysara, I'm Marcus. And I'm going to tell you something important. This is going to hurt a bit when I said it, but I promise I'll be as careful as I can. Deal?" Lysara nodded bravely, but her whole body trembled. Marcus worked slowly, using techniques he'd learned from a Drakari engineer years ago. The crystalline wing structures weren't so different from the composite materials he worked with daily, they needed support, alignment, and time to heal. He fabricated a delicate brace from lightweight titanium mesh, designed to distribute the pressure evenly while the natural healing process took over. As he worked, he talked. He told her about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests that she'd probably never seen. He told her about his daughter back home, about how she used to be scared of thunderstorms until he explained they were just the sky making music. "Does it hurt?" he asked as he secured the final connection. "Not as much as before," Lysara admitted. "Why are you being kind to me? The others on this station, they look at Drakari like we are monsters. They say we started the border wars." Marcus sat back on his heels, meeting her golden eyes directly. "I knew some Drakari soldiers during those wars, kid. You know what I learned? Every species has good people and bad people. What your government did doesn't define who you are. You're just a girl with a broken wing who needed help, and I'm just a mechanic who knows how to fix things." A mother's vigil. What neither Marcus nor Lysara knew was that Ambassador Cathras had returned to the station 3 hours earlier. Her diplomatic mission had concluded ahead of schedule, and she'd been frantically searching for her daughter ever since discovering Lysara had left their quarters. The station's security system had tracked Lysara to the repair bays, and now Cathras stood in the shadows of the observation corridor, watching through the transparasteel window as a human, a member of the species her people had fought a bitter war against, tended to her daughter with infinite gentleness. Cathras was no fool. She'd seen the station's records. Marcus Chan had been a combat engineer during the border wars, had lost friends to Drakari plasma fire. He had every reason to harbor hatred for her kind. Yet there he was, fabricating a custom brace with such care that it brought tears to Kethris's eyes. She watched as he finished his work, watched as he showed Lysara how to move her wing carefully, watched as her daughter, her precious, brave daughter, smiled for the first time since the accident that had damaged her wing. "All done," Marcus said, standing up and stretching his back. "The brace needs to stay on for 2 weeks, but you should be flying again in about a month. Your mother's going to need to take you to a proper Drakari healer for follow-up, though." "I'm good, but I'm not that good. How much do I owe you?" Lysara asked, fumbling with a small credit chip. Marcus waved her off. "Nothing, kid. Just promise me you'll be more careful climbing cargo containers in the future, okay?" Lysara's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "I've been around the block a few times," Marcus said with a grin. "I know what climbing accidents look like. Besides, your scales had synthetic cargo foam residue on them. Dead giveaway. The first step toward understanding." Lysara launched herself at Marcus, wrapping her arms around his waist in an unexpected embrace. "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you for seeing me as just a girl, not as a monster." Marcus felt something crack in his chest, some wall he'd built during the war years. He returned the hug awkwardly, patting her head between her small horns. "You take care of yourself, Lysara. And tell your mom I said hi when you see her." As Lysara left the repair bay, her steps lighter despite the brace on her wing, Kethris remained in the shadows. She had come prepared to retrieve her daughter with stern words about station protocol and diplomatic discretion. Instead, she found herself re-evaluating everything she thought she knew about humans. The war had painted them as brutal, uncompromising, interested only in territorial expansion. But this Marcus Chen had shown her daughter more compassion in 1 hour than the entire station medical staff had offered. He had seen past species, past politics, past history, to simply help a child in pain. Kethris made a decision then, one that would change the course of her diplomatic career and, though she didn't know it yet, the future of human-Drakari relations. She would arrange to meet this mechanic properly. She would learn what made humans like him capable of such kindness despite what they'd suffered in the war. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would find a way to bridge the vast gap between their peoples. As she walked back to her quarters, following her daughter's happy chatter about the nice human mechanic, Kethris allowed herself to hope that peace might be more than just a document signed by politicians. It might be something built person by person, one act of kindness at a time. When walls come down. An unexpected invitation. 3 days after Lysara's wing repair, Marcus received a formal diplomatic invitation. He stared at the holographic message floating above his workbench, certain it was some kind of mistake or possibly a very elaborate prank by his fellow mechanics. "Ambassador Kethris of the Drakari Concord requests the honor of your presence for an informal dinner discussion regarding technical cooperation initiatives." "Yeah, right," Marcus muttered, about to delete it when his comm unit chirped with a personal message. "Please come, Marcus. Mother wants to thank you properly. And she makes really good smoked synth meat." Lysara. Marcus smiled despite himself. The kid had apparently convinced her diplomat mother to arrange a dinner. He supposed he could spare one evening. Besides, he was curious about what technical cooperation initiatives meant in diplomatic speak. Breaking bread across species lines. Ambassador Kethris's quarters were nothing like Marcus expected. Instead of the austere diplomatic spaces he'd imagined, he found a home. Children's drawings decorated one wall, Lysara's artwork depicting various ships and stations. Books in multiple languages lined shelves. A viewing window showed a slowly rotating projection of what he assumed was the Drakari homeworld, with its purple skies and floating crystal mountains. "Mr. Chen, thank you for coming," Kethris said, greeting him at the door. She wore simple robes rather than diplomatic regalia, and her scales seemed to shimmer with a warmth he hadn't noticed in the security footage he'd later learned she'd been watching. "Just Marcus, please. And thank you for the invitation, Ambassador." "Then you must call me Kethris." She gestured toward a low table where Lysara was already seated, her injured wing held carefully in the brace Marcus had made. Please, sit. I hope you can tolerate Dracari cuisine. I prepared some dishes that should be compatible with human digestion. Conversations that matter. The dinner was revelation. Kethris was nothing like the rigid diplomats Marcus had encountered during post-war negotiations. She asked genuine questions about his work, about Earth, about his family. She listened when he talked about his daughter, Sarah, who he hadn't seen in person for 3 years due to the cost of interstellar travel on a mechanic's salary. In turn, she shared stories about the Dracari homeworld, about the crystal caverns where young Dracari learned to fly, about the poetry and art that filled their culture. Marcus found himself fascinated by the complexity of a people he'd only known as enemies during the war. I watched you with Lysara, Kethris admitted as they finished the meal. Through the observation window. I saw how carefully you treated her, how you spoke to her not as a Dracari, not as the daughter of someone you fought against, but simply as a child who needed help. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. It was just the right thing to do. Perhaps, Kethris said softly. But the right thing is often the hardest thing. You had every reason to turn her away. Instead, you showed her that kindness can exist across the divisions we create. Lysara looked up from her dessert. Marcus, can I ask you something? Sure, kid. Did you hate us? During the war? The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus considered lying, considered offering a comfortable platitude. Instead, he chose truth. Yeah, I did. When my best friend died in a Dracari ambush, I hated every single one of you. I thought you were all monsters who wanted nothing but conquest. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But then the war ended, and I started meeting actual Dracari people instead of just soldiers. I realized I'd been hating a whole species for the actions of their military. That's when I understood that hate is easy, but understanding takes work. And now? Kethris asked quietly. Now I think we're all just trying to survive in a complicated galaxy. The war happened. People died on both sides. But sitting here with you two, sharing a meal and conversation, this feels more real than any battle ever did. Seeds of change. Kethris stood and walked to her window, gazing out at the stars. I want to propose something unusual, Marcus. Something that has no precedent in diplomatic relations between our peoples. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. The Dracari Concord has many stations, many facilities that need maintenance and repair. We've been using automated systems and hired contractors, but the quality is inconsistent. What if we established a cultural exchange program? Human engineers teaching Dracari technicians, and Dracari engineers sharing their crystal resonance technology with humans? That's actually brilliant, Marcus said slowly. But why me? I'm just a mechanic. Surely there are better qualified. You are exactly the right person because you are just a mechanic, Kethris interrupted. Politicians and military leaders created the divisions between our peoples. Perhaps it will take ordinary people, mechanics and engineers and teachers, to build the bridges that reconnect us. Marcus thought about Sarah, about the galaxy she would inherit. Did he want it to be one where humans and Dracari remained suspicious enemies, or one where his daughter might work alongside Dracari friends? I'd need to think about it, he said. This is bigger than fixing a kid's wing. Of course, Kethris agreed. But while you think, consider this, Lysara told me you spoke of your daughter, about how you cannot afford to see her because of travel costs. If you were to lead this program, the Concord would provide housing, a substantial salary, and regular transport to Earth for family visits. Marcus felt his heart skip. You're serious? Completely. And Marcus? This is not charity. We need what you can offer, not just technical skill, but the ability to see past old wounds. To teach others to do the same. A new beginning. 2 months later, Marcus Chen stood in the main conference hall of Nexus 7, facing an audience of 30 human engineers and 30 Dracari technicians. It was the first session of what the media was calling the Chen Initiative, a cultural and technical exchange program that many politicians had opposed but couldn't stop once it gained public momentum. Lasara sat in the front row next to Marcus's daughter Sarah, whom he'd brought to the station using his new position's travel benefits. The two girls had become fast friends despite the language barrier, communicating through drawings and laughter. 3 months ago, Marcus began, I was just a mechanic in a repair bay. Then a younger Carrie girl with a broken wing asked for help, and I made a choice. I chose to see a child who needed help rather than a member of a species I'd been taught to fear. He paused, looking at the mixed audience of humans under Carrie. We can't change the past. The border wars happened. People died. Atrocities were committed by both sides. But we can choose what we build from the ashes. We can choose understanding over hatred, cooperation over conflict, friendship over fear. Ambassador Kethra stood in the back of the hall, watching with satisfaction as the two groups of engineers began their first collaborative exercise. It wasn't perfect, there was awkwardness, hesitation, the weight of history bearing down on every interaction. But it was a start. And sometimes, the greatest revolutions begin with the smallest acts of kindness. A mechanic fixing a child's wing. A mother recognizing compassion in an old enemy. Two children laughing together despite coming from worlds that had been at war. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, but watching humans and Drakari work side by side, Kethris allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were building something that would last. Something stronger than hatred, more enduring than war. They were building understanding, one person at a time. And in a universe that often seemed determined to tear itself apart, that was the most revolutionary act of all.